Hey guys, it's Dave from Clockwork Guitar, coming to you once again from the Game Room studio. And today I wanted to get further into modes. We've talked a little bit about the major scale and the minor scales, kind of trying to establish what is normal, what you normally hear with the standard major and minor tonalities. When we get into modes, we kind of diverge from that. And I think it's helpful to sort of set up normal major, normal minor, because then when we start looking at the modes, we start to shift things a little bit and change things up, and you get a different sound. Now the tonality, the fundamental tonality, is still major or minor, typically. What I mean by that is that it is based around a major triad or a minor triad on the one chord, but the notes that surround that chord might shift a little bit here and there, depending on what mode you're using, okay? Now some people, just a note on modes, some people when they talk about modes, they like to relate it back to the major scale pattern and say, you know, that a mode would simply be taking the major scale pattern and starting on the second note or the third note or the fourth note. Which is true. I kind of prefer to think about modes in a different way, though. I would rather take what I consider to be the major modes, i.e. modes that have a major one chord, and see how they diverge from natural major. Okay? So your tonic is still going to be the same key, right? It's just that the scale changes slightly. And really, it's only one note shift. So if I go from natural major to one of the other major modes, I'm really only changing one note out of the scale to get a different sound. Okay? So the first mode that I want to look at is Mixolydian. And Mixolydian is a major mode that you hear quite often, actually. And it's the fifth mode, meaning that if you take a major scale pattern, let's say C major, okay, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, and you start, or you tonicize the fifth note. Tonicize meaning we're establishing that note as being home, right? Resolving back to that note. If you start on the fifth note of that scale pattern and use the exact same notes, the fifth note in the key of C would be G. So if I start on G and I use the same notes from the C major scale pattern, I would get G Mixolydian. Okay? The question is, how does G Mixolydian differ from G major? That's the question. And that's the part that I like to focus on, because if we like to, if we relate everything back to C major, then I'm just playing a C major scale and I'm starting on G and it still sounds like a C major scale, and my ear can still hear that I'm resolving back to C. I would rather start on G, for example, and play Mixolydian and listen to how it differs from G major. Okay? So the we'll take E, for example. E major scale. We've talked about the major scale. That's the standard stuff. We got a half step in between 3 and 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Half step to 4. 5, 6, 7. Half step between 7 and 1. We've all heard that sound. We've talked about it already. With Mixolydian, what that does is, if I was going to play an E Mixolydian, I would take the 7th tone and I would flat it. Okay? So I'm moving it down a half step. I'm shifting where the half step relationships in the scale are. So now, instead of having a half step relationship between 7 and 1, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, now 7 is going to be a whole step below the root. And there's a half step in between 6 and 7. 1, 2, 3, 4. Still a half step between 3 and 4. 5, 6. Half step up to 7. And then a whole step up to 1. Okay? I still only have 2 places in the scale where there's a half-step relationship, but now, instead of being between 7 and 1, it's between 6 and 7. And there's a whole step between 7 and 1. All right. This is going to change the structure of the chords that are created using the Mixolydian mode. All right? And I'm not going to go through each one in detail. Rather, I'm going to point out kind of the highlights, the big chords that are changed because of that alteration, and then give a sound example of how this sounds, right? So the 2 major alterations, really, from the major key. In the major key, we're talking E major, or any major key, honestly. The 1 chord is major, the 4 chord is major, and the 5 chord is also major. Those are your 3 major chords. In Mixolydian, because of that flatted 7th tone, 1 chord is still major, 4 chord is also still major, but the 5 chord is now minor. I'll play it down here. So we have a major 1, major 4, minor 5. Okay? The note that made the 5 chord major in natural major has been flatted and now causes the 5 chord to be minor. Cool? And you can hear that change happening in a bunch of different songs across different genres. One of them would be Bittersweet Symphony by The Verve, if you've ever listened to that. I'm trying to whistle it. It's not really working. Another example of that would be Clocks by Coldplay. It's not in the right key, but you get the idea. And then it goes to the 2 chord, 1 chord, minor 5. That stays on minor 5. And then to the minor 2 chord, resolves back to 1. E still sounds like our root in this case. We just have a minor 5 chord, right? A little bit of a different color, a little darker. The other place where that flatted 7th tone affects the chords in the key is on the 7th tone itself, the chord that is built off of 7. So in natural major, as we've talked about, the chord built on 7 is diminished, okay? Naturally. In the case of Mixolydian, we flatted that 7, and the chord that results, built off the 7th tone, is major. Okay, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, half step up to 7, which is a D in the key of E. We build a chord off of that using notes out of E Mixolydian, and we get a D major chord. So in this case, the major chords in E Mixolydian, or in any Mixolydian scale, would be the 1 chord, the 4 chord, and the 7. Okay? And if you've ever heard we're still resolving back to E. We're still tonicizing E, but now we have a major chord built on the flatted 7, right? And you can hear this all over the place. The end of Hey Jude by the Beatles. Hey Jude. That's still our resolution right there. Okay? It's all over the place. Now, so where does the diminished chord go when you're using Mixolydian? Well, the diminished chord ends up being 3 in this case. So you're probably not going to be using the 3 chord if you're being strict about being in Mixolydian. As just an aside, there's nothing to say that you have to be strict about being in one mode or another. You can start off in E major and then shift to Mixolydian at some point in the song. Maybe go to the chorus and it's Mixolydian. There's no reason you can't do that. It happens all the time. Sometimes it happens within the same section of the song. So, you know, you'll have a 1 chord, major 5 chord, major chord built off the flatted 7 from Mixolydian to 4. 1 chord, major 5, major on the flatted 7, major on the 4 chord. So you're kind of combining a couple of different modes together, mode shifting, but E is still tonic. Does that make sense? So the scale in this case, as I said, 4, 5, 6, flatted 7. All right, I'm going to give you an example of a chord progression that is just in Mixolydian. I'll play over it melodically as I do. And, you know, I'm going to come back. I'm going to make some more videos that explore different ways that you can work around Mixolydian, combinations of notes, and just get a little deeper into that. For this, we're just trying to get the sound down, okay? We're trying to get comfortable with the sound and be able to recognize it when we hear it. So I'm not necessarily going to stay in any particular pattern. I'm just going to be moving around on the guitar neck, trying to make use of this sound and be very obvious about that flatted 7, because that's the important note, okay? All right, so let's set something up. Here we go. Oop. Didn't happen. Hold on 1 second. Minor 5, 4 chord, 1, minor 5. All right, so a simple progression, 1, minor 5, 4. That's it, okay? Now, let me play that back, and I will play melodically over the top of it, and you can hear kind of what that sounds like. Here we go. Cool. That kind of give you an idea, right? I was trying to be obvious when I was playing that. Flat 7, 1, flat 7, 1, 6, 5, 4, 3. A fundamental chord is still major. Just throwing that flatted 7 in there sometimes to play around the minor 5 chord. Does that make sense? All right, so hopefully that's been helpful, establishing that sound. like I said before, my plan is to create some other videos that will show you different ways that you can play around Mixolydian, give you different combinations of notes, pentatonic scales, etc. How the chords fit together and all that stuff. But for this, we're just talking mostly about the sound. So go out and see if you can find something that sounds like Mixolydian, and we should be good. All right, guys.